Welcome to Tentative Title with Tim. This is a podcast about creativity, about process, about filmmaking, and about screenwriting. Welcome everybody back to the podcast. Once again, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're being creative. I hope you're doing the things you want to do. So, today's topic, I wanted to talk about visual literacy and the visual language that if you're a filmmaker, which this is a filmmaking podcast, so I'm speaking to filmmakers, and I know I've been talking a lot about writing because that's a lot of what I've been focusing on in the last couple years. But being able to tell a story visually is not only something that you have to do on the page, but it's kind of the end goal if you're going to be a filmmaker. And nowadays, that ability to tell a story visually has become kind of complicated. It used to be there were movies and there were TV shows. Yeah, there was theater, obviously, but I'm going to talk about just the projected images. Obviously, there was art and stuff like that, paintings and stuff of that nature, which has influenced cinema in a very strong sense. I mean, when you are making a movie, you are looking at all kinds of different images. You are looking at artwork. You are looking at other movies. You are looking at television. You're trying to fill up your brain with ways in which you can tell your own story and to have examples of how to tell your own story. So going back to it being kind of simple in terms of cultivating your own visual literacy. You would go to the movie theater and you would see a movie. And depending on the genre, obviously there were movies that weren't put together that well, like the editing sucked, or just the people who were doing the cinematography didn't know how to craft a shot. Sure, there was that. Then there were the masterpieces that when you watch them, they were experiences. They took you out of the real world for a couple hours and you were just engulfed with the language of the film, of the visual information that they were giving you from scene to scene. And it was actually quite a refreshing and motivating and energetic experience to see a good movie. Not just story, not just characters, but the way in which they told the story. And that was a distinction from television, which you usually had a studio with 3 cameras, the sitcom setup, or even if it was just a single camera, hour-long drama, there was still something different about it. There was a different way in which they were telling the story with their visuals. And there was this understanding, both with the editing and the way it was shot, that you were watching a television show. And even, the way it was written with act breaks, to making sure that there was room for ads and commercials to be put in, changed the way in which you brought in that information. Like you would have all these cliffhangers before you went to commercial, which would guide you through the entire show because you would go from one cliffhanger to another, to another, to another. So there was a distinction, right? And you went to the movies to see a movie. You went to the movie theater to see a movie. You would turn on your television to watch television. And those were 2 separate experiences. And then streaming came along. And, I'm kind of glossing over the fact that there was VHS and DVD, that just heightened our ability to be able to understand stories even more so visually, because we could watch them over and over and over again, and we started to recognize patterns. We started to see what a director would do with their camera, how they would tell a story, and we could break it apart, especially if you were very interested in that. And even if you weren't, like, subconsciously, you would watch these, you would watch a film over and over and over again, and you would enjoy it. And sometimes you didn't necessarily understand why you enjoyed one movie over another. It was just something about it. Like, it could have been an actor, it could have been the story, it could have been a sequence that was really cool. But overall, I have to think that the reason why certain movies held up was because of this visual literacy, this visual language that the movie, taught you. Like, a movie is essentially teaching the audience how it wants to be watched. And so, over time, we kind of got this visual literacy because we were rewatching so many movies, and we were able to watch older movies. And so this education started to happen as we were getting access to older movies and being able to watch them over and over again. And then streaming came along, and there was this debate about what is a movie. Is a movie only something that you watch in a movie theater, or is it something that you can watch online on a streaming site? And that debate still is kind of relevant now. I think some people are still debating what actually a movie is, because we don't want to necessarily accept that a movie is something that is on a streaming site, because a movie is so much more than that. And if you're kind of a purist in that way, you want movies to be in movie theaters on a huge screen with surround sound and just this all-encompassing experience that we all get to feel, and especially a collective experience. If you watch something online, if you're streaming something, I don't want to say you're usually by yourself, but it's a different experience. Like, you don't watch a comedy in the same way in a movie theater as you do at home. Like, usually if you're watching a comedy in a movie theater, all that energy of the people around you make the comedy much, like, you're just more susceptible to it. You laugh at more things because everybody's there to laugh. Everybody's there to see a comedy. And so all that energy kind of makes the what's happening in the movie even more hilarious. But then when you take that same movie and you try to watch it at home by yourself, like, you may not laugh nearly as often as you did when you saw it in the movie theater. So kind of getting off the subject, but go with me with this. So then we had YouTube come along, and YouTube started to do, like, people started to live stream. And so we had more of a visual literacy of just talking heads, like news, and people just giving us information about things. And that became our entertainment. And then there was, obviously an offshoot of that is like Twitch and TikTok and the way in which we consume visuals got smaller, because we were watching this on our phones, or we were watching it on a computer screen. And so that our idea of, like, what was considered to be an interesting shot or an interesting way to convey information, in a way, kind of got stripped away, because it was more about hearing the information than it was about seeing the information. It was more about people talking and giving in dialogue and receiving information through that, and not through what we saw. And I'm not saying that, like, live streams and Twitch, kind of took all that away, because it's still there. We still, like, have movies that are being produced that are quite visually stunning, that are beautiful films, and it's still there. There are still people who enjoy that kind of visual literacy, that still want to see interesting visuals. Case in point, like, Dune. Dune was a really, it seemed to be a very successful film, and everybody that loved that film loved the visuals. There was this visual storytelling that was happening. There was this literacy about the way to move the camera, about how to show things, how to show the world. And, some people loved it, and other people thought it was really boring. But I think that's because what we deem to be entertaining nowadays is much faster, involves much more of our pulling in of our attention. If something that we're watching doesn't interest us, it doesn't entertain us, it doesn't give us the satisfaction of the story right away, we tend to turn it off. It's hard for us to have patience with what is what is cinema nowadays. And that's really sad, because I think that allowing a story to unfold before you, even if we don't get all the information, and it can be very frustrating when you're watching something and you're not getting the answers that you want right away. And I have to believe that we're kind of somewhere in the middle, where we are willing to accept not getting answers for a very, very long time from certain things, and then there are other things where we really want to have the satisfaction, the answers right away. And that's all in the way that we show the story. And so how do we craft our movies in a way that is still gives this kind of literacy, this language to how we can uphold the finest visuals that we can create, while also being very entertaining. And it's hard to say in words, obviously, because we're talking about a visual medium. But, if you look at somebody like Steven Spielberg, he knows how to move the camera. He knows how to use blocking of the actors in order to keep you interested in the scene. Now, he's known for doing what is considered to be a oneer. If you watch any of his films, he usually has a scene in which there are characters talking and he's moving the camera, but he's also moving the actors as well. And it's a very, he crafts it very carefully. It's a sleight of hand, because you don't realize that the actors are moving and the camera isn't cutting. But yet he'll have this long dialogue scene where these characters are moving around, the cameras are moving, and yet you're getting so much information pertaining to the story. And I think that's brilliant. And I see certain films are able to use that tool of the oneer in a very effective way. But that's part of the literacy. That's part of the visual literacy that I think as creative people, when we're, if you're a filmmaker and you're trying to put together a scene, that you can look at it as you don't have to cut. There's a way in which you can move your actors around and keep the camera rolling, and it's still going to be interesting. And you can shoot a scene hundreds of different ways. Like I'm not going to say that they're all going to be the right way. There's definitely a way that is more interesting than another way. But that's something that we need to teach to other people, that we need to teach our audience about how you can do interesting things with the camera. You can do interesting things with blocking that will keep their attention. And it doesn't have to be all about cutting. It doesn't always have to be about these generic ways in which most films are put together, or most shows are put together. And you can kind of see that with a master of cinema, how they are able to take a scene that's on the page, which could, in a way, be kind of a very mundane scene. Like, you read it and you're like, yeah, so what? It's two people talking, whatever. Like, maybe there's conflict between the two characters. Maybe, like, with some context, this is a big scene where one character is deciding, to do something to the other character, or to reveal some kind of information. It could be a big scene. But you could also have a big scene and have somebody approach it and film it, and it be not interesting and not tense and not and have it be quite boring. But if you have somebody who understands the visual literacy, the what you can do with a camera, how you can convey information without, you might not even need the actors to say anything. You can just, by the way the camera is placed, by the reaction of the actors, by things you put in the scene, the mise-en-scene, what you carefully craft inside the frame. That is all part of this literacy that I'm talking about. And I don't know how much people think about it. I know it's something that was taught in school. That was something that I took a couple classes on, and that was an interesting way to look at cinema, because then whenever I would watch something, I would pay attention to not only what the actors were doing, but what was happening around the actors, how the angle of the camera, what lens they were using, what was in focus, what was out of focus, how the camera would move. And, you begin to see that sometimes the camera would move for no reason. And you're like, well, why did the camera move? There was no reason for the camera to do anything. It could have stayed still, and that would have been more powerful. But, certain tropes, certain visual tropes come into play, and they end up kind of permeating in, there used to be the shaky cam. The shaky cam was a big thing for a while, and then it became the framing of an actor where you didn't give them any nose room. Which, if you don't know what nose room is, it's like when you're framing up an actor in a medium, whichever way the actor is facing, you give them a lot of space on the side of the frame that the actor is looking. But one of the I guess tropes, or one of the tools that started to come into play, which expanded on this visual literacy, was not giving the actor any nose room. So it was like the actor was looking at the edge of the frame, and there was so much negative space on the opposite side of them. And it was a weird thing that came into play, but it was only effective in a couple of ways. And it was only effective in a couple of movies. But it ended up being something that somebody tried, and a bunch of people liked it, and so they tried to do it in their own stuff. So, yeah, stuff like that, just seeing how things evolve, seeing how we kind of bring in the unspoken information in terms of television and movies. It's all, once you start to see it, once you start to analyze it, once you start to pick apart why a movie that uses the same kind of tools, you could have two movies, one that's brilliant and one that isn't, and yet they use the same kind of visual language. You start to understand, maybe there's, you start to understand how things are put together, and you start to understand that maybe the visual language that this one movie used was not the correct one, because they were just being a copycat of something else, when they should have used their own. They should have taken their story and interpreted it in their own visual terms. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. It's a not like we could talk about this forever because it's so interesting. It's so interesting how all the nonverbal cues, all the things, all the visuals that are put in front of us tell a story. And sometimes it's a great story. It sometimes all those the information that we put in front of the audience can tell the story really well, and sometimes it doesn't tell the story at all. And it's all about how we craft that and how we think about the story we're trying to tell, and that we don't try to copycat what is out there, but we can take influence. We can, say, okay, well, I'm telling a similar story to this other thing, so I can take these visual tropes and use them and expand upon them to tell my own story. And, even though it's very muddy out there when it comes to like visuals, like, we can still, with our own stuff, create very interesting images and pass on, this wealth of information of ways in which you can interpret a story visually. I think it's very important going into the future. I think that it's an art form that we need to keep, passing on to the next generation, and not just have, right now it's like, yeah, we still have cinema, we still have television shows, but there's something about it where I don't think the importance of crafting a scene visually, of how to tell a story visually, is as important as it once was. I think a lot of what comes out nowadays is more reliant on dialogue, more reliant on just like actors talking to each other than it is about what you can do with the camera, what you can show, how you show it, how you can move your actors around in a scene to convey, like the relationships. There's so much more you can do, and the more you watch of good stuff, the more you get those ideas of how to do it properly and just studying up on it. So I want to encourage everybody out there, like especially like filmmakers. I'm talking to filmmakers here. Like, just keep studying up, keep finding different ways in which you can tell a story visually, because like I think that's one of the things that we're gonna need. Like, we're always going to need to have stories. We're going to always have a need to tell stories visually. And, I don't want the future of what we, of the arts of filmmaking to just be talking heads. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think things are going to last with just people talking. It's all content and consumable stuff, and it's not beautiful. It's not art. It's just not. Like, we need beautiful things in our lives. We need visuals that reflect a perspective of the world, and is able to do something interesting that the audience will want to come back to over and over and over again. So all right, guys, that's all I got for today. Thank you again for tuning in and listening to me talk about, well, visual literacy. So yeah, if you're looking for a good resource, Martin Scorsese is one of those filmmakers who is constantly talking about literacy. And he has, like, he's an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to films. And so listening to him talk about filmmaking and the films to really study is a great place to start. Of course, there's the Criterion Collection. You can always start there to find very interesting films to watch. So, all right, guys, that's all I got for today. I have a live stream on Tuesday, so at 4 o'clock Pacific time. So, if you want to talk more about this, I'll be there. Yeah, it's on my YouTube channel for this podcast. If you look up Tentative Title with Tim podcast on YouTube, you'll see the logo, and subscribe and ring the bell so that you know when I go live. So, all right, guys, once again, that's all I got for today. I will talk to you on the next one. If you'd like to connect with me, there is an email for the podcast. It's tentative.title.with.tim.podcast @gmail.com. There's also a Twitter account. The handle is @title_Tim. There's also a Facebook page where you can post questions, or you can connect with me there. Thank you guys for listening. I'll talk to you on the next one.